Hey guys, if you missed the Google Meets in current events, February 4th, here's what we did. Learning target, we can identify bias in the media. Essential question, why is biased media dangerous? If you can't answer this question by the end of the day, that's fine. We're actually going to spend a few days working on this question because it's so big and important. Today we reviewed unconscious and conscious bias. We had a short discussion and then we worked on defining different types of bias in the media. Homework for the week was Levels of Thinking Jamboard, and remember that's due February 9th. You have 56 more days till the end of the term. All right, on the Padlet yesterday, I saw some really good examples and definitions of unconscious bias, and then some it looked like we needed some additional clarification, so I'm going to clarify it quick right now. Conscious bias, remember, is that intentional choice, and it's easy to keep your conscious bias in check or under control. So, like, one of my conscious biases is like if I'm watching a movie or a TV show and there's a mom character, like I'm a mom and I know that, and I'm going to relate to that character more than the other characters. I know that's my bias, and it's easy for me to keep that in check or under control. Unconscious bias isn't intentional, and it's harder to keep in check or under control because it's usually like a first thought or reaction or just something that pops into your brain automatically without you even like thinking it through. So for example, you might these are some posts from the Padlet that were good examples. You might think someone's smart just because they wear glasses, or when you see someone with a dented, beat up car, you automatically assume that they're a bad driver. Like if you were driving next to that person down the highway, you might like try to get past that person or go to a different lane because obviously they've been in a lot of accidents if they have a dented car. Here's another example. You might assume someone is super smart based off their race, or that they're not strong and athletic based off their gender. And here's one I added in there. I used to eat lunch with Miss Holly in the teacher's lounge, and she talked about her son having a tattoo on his face. And she said that a lot of people just assume he's been in jail or he's a criminal or just like a really mean person when that isn't exactly true. So that's a real life example from BHS. Hopefully that makes it a little bit more clear. Unconscious is harder to control because it's like your first initial reaction or thought. All right, moving on. The recognition of bias in the media has risen drastically the past 4 or 5 years or so, to the point where like past President Trump gave out fake news awards for the news outlets that he thought were the most biased. And whether you agree or disagree with President Trump on his politics, he does have one thing, right? Like there is a lot of bias in the media. All right, we had a discussion in class, but since you didn't make the Google Meets, you missed out on that super sweet discussion. We thought about we get our news, like individually, and some people got it from certain news outlets, some people got it from social media, some people just listen to the radio station and they kind of get their news on morning shows as they drive into school, and some people just hear about current events from their friends. All right. Then we looked at this chart from all sides that identifies the bias of different news outlets. All sides uses scientific data and research to kind of analyze these different news stories and news outlets to identify bias and then the level of bias for these news sources. So you might see some major networks on there like CNN, Fox, NBC, so on and so forth. On this chart, the L stands for liberal or like more democratic leaning. The R stands for right or more conservative or Republican leaning news outlets. The C would be centered, where they're somewhere in between. They are the more unbiased news sources. You'll notice that there's two different L's. They kind of vary in degrees of how left leaning they are. So the dark L means like they're really left leaning. The light L means they're slightly left leaning. The dark R over here means they're really right leaning. The light R over here means they're kind of right leaning. And then, of course, somewhere in between. One more thing that I'm going to point out on this chart, you'll notice that there might be like duplicates of some news sources, like Fox News over here is kind of conservative when it comes to their news only, but their opinion is like super duper conservative. Same thing with NPR. They score like right here in the center column when it comes to just their news, but their opinion section tends to be more left-leaning. Just keep that in mind. All right, so here's what you're going to be doing today. You're going to be defining different types of bias using this media bias link from allsides.org. If you click on it and open it up, it'll look something like this, where it has all those types of bias described right here. You're going to be doing some level 1 and level 2 thinking with the definitions. Some of these types of bias, it'll kind of come out and say the definition, but sometimes you might have to read between the lines a little bit. And then you're going to go ahead and give an example or a few examples for the ones that ask for examples. And that's just going to be level 1 thinking. It's going to be just right in there when it gives examples, where it literally says, look, examples, and you can go ahead and just copy those into your assignment. If you have any questions about this assignment, make sure you ask. Know that you will be able to use these notes on the end of the week exam, which is going to be on Friday.